The champagne was cold, and the afternoon sun over Austin was brutal. And I stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new downtown office, watching my sister and my parents walk across the parking lot below me. My sister was in heels that were too high for the heat, and I could see even from 12 floors up that she was furious. My father had his arm around my mother, who kept looking back up at the building as if she expected me to appear at the window and wave them back in. I did not wave. I held my glass and I watched until their car pulled out of the lot and disappeared into the midday traffic. And then I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 31 years. 6 hours earlier, I had been sitting at my own conference table listening to my sister tell me that I owed her half of everything I had built, and I want to tell you exactly how we got there, because the beginning of this story matters just as much as the ending. I grew up in a small city outside of San Antonio, the younger of 2 daughters. My sister was 4 years older than me, and from the time I was old enough to understand what favoritism meant, I understood that it applied to everything in our house. My sister was the one who got the car at 16. My sister was the one whose college tuition was paid in full without a single conversation about contribution. My sister was the one my parents introduced at every family gathering with a kind of pride that made the air around her shimmer, while I stood slightly behind and to the left, learning to make myself small enough not to take up space they had not allocated for me. It was not that my parents were cruel in an obvious way. There were no dramatic scenes. It was quieter than that. And in some ways, quieter is harder to name, because when you try to explain it, people tell you you're being too sensitive. My father would spend an entire Sunday afternoon teaching my sister to drive in an empty parking lot, patient and laughing. And when it was my turn 2 years later, he handed me the keys and said he was tired and that I'd figure it out. My mother would spend weeks planning my sister's birthday parties, and remember mine 2 days before, if she remembered at all. When I graduated with honors from high school, my parents threw my sister a party to celebrate her engagement that same weekend, and the timing was not a coincidence. It was simply how things worked in our family. My sister's life was the main event. Mine was the background noise. I stopped expecting otherwise by the time I was 17. I redirected every ounce of that energy into school and then into work, because work, unlike family, would reward what I actually put in. I got a partial scholarship, took out loans for the rest, and worked 20 hours a week through college. I majored in computer science because I was good at it and because I believed it would give me independence, which was the one thing I had decided I needed more than anything else. After graduation, I took a job at a mid-sized software firm in Austin, and I was good at that too. I worked long hours. I asked questions. I took projects no one else wanted because no one else wanted them, and I believed that something could be made of them. And somewhere in those late nights and weekends, I started working on something on my own time. A data processing framework that could dramatically compress the time it took enterprise systems to handle large-scale financial compliance reporting. I built it in pieces over 3 years, filed a provisional patent on my own, hired an IP attorney when I could afford to, and made it real. During those same 3 years, my parents had been running the family's small logistics and courier business, which they had built over 2 decades and which employed about 40 people. My sister had joined the business after her first marriage fell apart, and my parents, because they were my parents, gave her a management role she had not earned and a salary that was generous by any measure. I helped occasionally on weekends with their accounting software and their invoicing systems because I understood those things and they did not, and because even when a family has never made you feel like you belong to it, you still show up. That is something no one warns you about. You show up anyway. 3 years into my sister's management role, the business was struggling. I could see it in the numbers when I helped with the books. Vendor relationships had deteriorated. 2 major contracts had been lost. There was a line of credit that had grown substantially and an operational efficiency problem that no one wanted to address directly. I brought it up once at a Sunday dinner and my sister told me to stay in my lane, and my father told me that Claire had it handled, and my mother changed the subject, and I did not bring it up again. 6 months after that dinner, my parents called me to the house for what they described as a family meeting. I drove the 90 minutes from Austin thinking it was about the business, that perhaps they had finally decided to take the situation seriously and wanted my help. I was partially right about the subject. I was completely wrong about my role in it. They sat me down at the kitchen table where I had done homework as a child, and my father said that the business was going through a restructuring and that in order to stabilize things, they were going to be consolidating management. My sister was going to take on full operational and financial control. They were formalizing this through a new ownership structure. They had spoken to a lawyer. There was paperwork. I asked where I fit into this restructuring, because I had been helping with the system's infrastructure on evenings and weekends without pay for the better part of 3 years, and I had assumed, perhaps foolishly, that this meant something. My mother looked at her hands. My father said that they appreciated everything I had done but that I was not involved in the day-to-day, and that the new structure reflected the people who were building the business together. My sister sat across from me with an expression that I can only describe as practiced neutrality, which meant she had known about this conversation for a long time before I walked through that door. I asked if I was being removed from helping with the business entirely. My father said that the systems would be handled internally going forward. I said, "So I'm being let go." He said he would not characterize it that way. I drove back to Austin that evening and I called no one, because there was no one to call who would have been surprised. I sat in my apartment and I understood with a kind of cold clarity that I had been a resource, not a member. I had been used for my skills when they were convenient, and set aside when the arrangement needed to change. The difference between me and a contractor was that a contractor gets paid. I went back to my own work with a focus that I can only describe as clean. There was something clarifying about it. When there is nothing left to lose from a family that never gave you much to begin with, you stop splitting your attention. I spent the next 14 months finishing the framework, working with my attorney to complete the patent filings, and quietly putting together a portfolio of documentation and demonstrations. My attorney connected me with a technology licensing consultant who helped me approach 3 enterprise software companies. The second company we contacted came back with serious interest within 6 weeks. The acquisition closed on a Thursday in March. $31 million, net of fees and taxes, transferred into an account that existed only in my name, in a bank that had nothing to do with anyone in my family. I took Friday off work. I went for a long run on the trail by the river and I bought myself a good dinner and I did not tell a single person who shared my last name. I want to answer the question you're probably asking right now, because it is the same question a lot of people ask when they hear a story like this. How did they find out? The acquisition was completed through a licensing and IP transfer agreement, and while the financial terms were not publicly disclosed, my name appeared in a press release issued by the acquiring company. It was a standard corporate announcement, the kind that runs on a dozen business wire services and gets picked up by trade publications. I had not thought about that, or perhaps I had not wanted to think about it. A woman I had worked with briefly at my old firm saw my name in one of those trade publications. She mentioned it to a mutual acquaintance. That acquaintance happened to have a cousin who attended the same church as my mother. My mother called me on a Saturday morning, 11 days after the acquisition closed. She did not mention the press release. She asked how I was doing, which she had not asked in 4 months. She asked if I was still at the same apartment. She asked, very casually, whether I had any exciting news to share. I said that things were going well. She said that she was glad to hear it, and that she and my father were thinking of coming to Austin the following weekend, if I was free. I said that I would check my schedule. I called my attorney that afternoon. Then I called a friend from college named Marcus, who had become a family law attorney in Dallas, and who had been one of the few people I had trusted completely since I was 22 years old. I explained the situation. I explained what I expected to happen, Marcus said, and I will always love him for this, that I was probably right, and that the best thing I could do was be prepared. I want to be transparent about what happened next, because the audience of a story like this always wants to know if the person telling it did everything right, and I did not always do everything right, but I did do this right. Before my parents came to Austin, I prepared. I went through 3 years of records of every hour I had spent working on the family business systems without compensation. I had emails, I had text messages, I had accounting documents I had prepared and sent. I had, because I am the kind of person who documents things, a folder on my laptop with timestamps. Marcus reviewed everything. He told me what I had and what I did not have and what I should and should not say when the time came. He also told me to record every conversation because Texas is a one-party consent state, and because he already knew my family better than he had ever met them. My parents arrived on a Sunday. My sister arrived with them, which I had expected, because my sister does not allow significant financial conversations to occur without her. They came to my apartment and I made coffee, and the first 45 minutes were entirely pleasant. My mother complimented my furniture. My father asked about my work. My sister smiled in a way that did not reach her eyes and said that I seemed to be doing well for myself. Then my father cleared his throat and said that they had seen some news about a business deal and that they wanted to say how proud they were. I thanked him. My mother said that it must have been such a big undertaking and that she hoped I hadn't taken on too much financial risk, because you never know with these technology things. I said that it had gone well. My sister put down her coffee cup and said that she had been thinking, and that given that I had developed my skills in large part through the environment my parents had created, through the education they had supported, and the opportunities they had provided, it seemed fair to have a conversation about what family contribution to my success might look like going forward. I looked at her. I asked her to say more about what she meant. She said that she thought a percentage arrangement made sense, that families should benefit from each other's success, that she and my parents had given me a foundation, and that a foundation deserved recognition. My father said that they were not asking for anything unreasonable, just a conversation, just an acknowledgement that no one builds something like this alone. I thought about the parking lot where my father handed me the car keys and walked back inside. I thought about the Sunday dinner where I raised the business concerns and was told to stay in my lane. I thought about the kitchen table where they had restructured the ownership of the business I had spent 3 years supporting without pay and informed me of the change as if it were a logistical update. I told them I needed a few days to think about it. They stayed for another hour. When they left, my sister hugged me at the door and whispered that she knew we could work this out, that we were family, and that family sticks together. The recording app on my phone was running the entire time. I gave Marcus a call that evening. He listened to the recording. He said that the conversation about percentage arrangements and family contribution was exactly what he had expected, and that what I had recorded was useful context, but that it was also not the most significant thing he had found that week. He had been doing some digging, because that is what Marcus does when someone he cares about is potentially being taken advantage of. What he found was that approximately 2 years prior, a line of credit had been opened in my name at a financial institution in San Antonio. The address on the application was my parents' home address. The signature on the application was not mine. The credit line had been used to fund operational costs at the family business. The outstanding balance was $64,000. I sat very still when Marcus told me this. I asked him to repeat the number. He repeated it. I asked him how long this had been going on. He said the account was opened 26 months ago. I had been helping with their accounting software. I had been driving 90 minutes each way on weekends to input data and troubleshoot their systems. And at the same time, someone in that family had opened a line of credit in my name and spent $64,000 and made the minimum payments and hoped I would never look closely enough to notice. I want you to understand that I was not naive. I had known for most of my life that I was the child who was used when using was convenient. But there is a difference between being dismissed and being defrauded. There is a difference between being set aside and being actively stolen from. And sitting in my apartment with the phone pressed to my ear, I felt something shift permanently inside me. Whatever small, stubborn filament of hope I had carried into that Sunday conversation dissolved completely. Marcus told me what my options were. I told him what I wanted to do. He said he would begin preparing the documentation. Over the following 2 weeks, I did 3 things. First, I disputed the fraudulent credit line and filed a formal identity theft report with the FTC and with the Austin field office of the FBI, along with the documentation Marcus had compiled. Second, I retained a forensic accountant to conduct a full review of the records I had kept from my years of supporting the family business, to establish the value of the uncompensated work and to identify any other financial irregularities that touched my name. Third, I did not return my family's calls. There were 22 of them over 9 days, and I let every single one go to voicemail. My sister left messages that started warm and became progressively less warm. My mother left 3 messages that were crying. My father left one that said he hoped we could resolve things as a family before they became something bigger. They became something bigger. The investigation moved faster than I expected, largely because the documentation was clean, and because the forensic accountant found 2 additional accounts that had been opened with my information, both during the period when I had been helping with the family business's systems and therefore in proximity to my financial documents. My sister had not been careful because she had not expected to be caught. When you have spent your entire life as the golden child, you develop a kind of operational confidence that everything you do will be overlooked. It was not overlooked this time. My sister was charged with identity theft and financial fraud. The charges were serious. Her attorney negotiated, and because she had no prior record and cooperated with the investigation, she did not go to prison. But she was placed on 5 years formal probation, ordered to repay the full amount of the fraudulent debt with interest, ordered to perform 200 hours of community service. And the conviction was on her record in a way that would follow her through every background check and professional licensing application for the rest of her life. The golden child had a permanent tarnish now. My parents were not charged, because the investigation concluded that my sister had acted without their explicit knowledge, though I will tell you privately that I have never been entirely certain of that conclusion. What happened to my parents was perhaps more instructive than a charge would have been. The family business, which had been struggling before my sister took control and was now in genuine distress, lost its 2 remaining major contracts when the fraud investigation became a matter of public record. Small business communities in small cities are not forgiving of that kind of news. The bank called the business line of credit. My parents did not have the assets to cover it. The business that my father had built over 2 decades, the business that had been the source of every holiday dinner conversation and every piece of my sister's identity and every justification for why they needed me and could simultaneously ignore me, was liquidated. They lost the house 18 months later. The equity was consumed by debt that had accumulated during the years my sister was in charge, debt that my parents had co-signed on without understanding the terms because they had trusted my sister's management implicitly and completely, the way they had always trusted her, the way they had never once trusted me. They are renting a 2-bedroom apartment in a suburb of San Antonio now. My father does consulting work on logistics contracts, small accounts, nothing like what the business used to handle. My mother works part-time at a pediatric office doing administrative work. I know these things because Marcus keeps me informed of anything that might have legal relevance, not because I have spoken to them. They have written to me twice. The first letter asked for forgiveness and for a loan to help stabilize their housing situation. The second letter, 6 months later, was shorter. It said that they hoped I was well and that they were proud of the woman I had become, which was a sentence I read 3 times and then put face down on my desk and did not pick up again. I shredded both letters the same day. Forgiveness is a private practice, and it is something I am working on for my own sake, because carrying the weight of what was done to me costs me energy that I would rather spend building. But forgiveness does not require contact. It does not require funding. It does not require me to pretend that the people who defrauded me and dismissed me and handed me car keys and walked back inside deserve access to a life I built entirely without them. My sister sent me a message through a mutual acquaintance 8 months ago. The message said that she had done a lot of reflection and that she was genuinely sorry and that she hoped one day we could have a relationship. I had Marcus send a brief written response on my behalf that acknowledged the message and stated clearly that I wished her well and had no interest in further contact. That was the end of it. The morning I opened Meridian Consulting, I stood in the lobby of our office on the 12th floor of a building in downtown Austin, and I looked at the people I had hired. 12 people, 8 of whom had been let go from the family business during the deterioration of my sister's management, people who had worked loyally for my parents for years and had lost their jobs through no fault of their own. I had called each of them personally. I had offered salaries above market rate and benefits that were better than anything they had received before. When I watched them walk into that lobby on the first morning, I thought about the Sunday afternoons I had spent driving 90 minutes each way to fix their payroll software for free, and I felt the full, strange weight of how things end up. Marcus came that morning. He brought breakfast tacos and stood in the corner watching me shake hands with the staff, and later when the office was busy and humming, he pulled me aside and said, quietly, that he was glad it had worked out the way it had. I told him it had not worked out. It had been constructed, deliberately, out of everything they had refused to give me. He nodded and said, that was a better way to put it. I want to tell you the thing that took me the longest to understand, because I think it is the thing that might be most useful if you are somewhere in the middle of what I was going through. For a long time, I believed that being the invisible child, the one who never got the car or the paid tuition or the seat at the table, was a disadvantage that I had to overcome. I believed I was operating at a deficit, that I had started behind and was running to catch up to something the rest of the world had been given automatically. It took me years to understand that what actually happened was the opposite. Being left to figure things out alone meant that I figured them out. Being refused a safety net meant that I built stability into every decision I made, because I knew from a very young age that if I fell, no one was coming. Being overlooked meant that no one monitored what I was building in the margins of my life, in the late evenings and the quiet weekends, which was exactly where the most important things got made. The family that raises you to be the afterthought is accidentally training you to be the architect. There is something else I want to say, because the comments on these stories always include people who ask why the person at the center of the story ever helped the family in the first place. Why show up? Why drive the 90 minutes? Why fix the software for free? And I understand the question, because from the outside it looks like a choice that a sensible person would not make. But I want you to consider the possibility that showing up was not weakness. I showed up because I believed in the possibility that the relationship could be something different. I showed up because hope is not stupidity, even when it turns out to be wrong. And when the evidence became impossible to ignore, when it moved from dismissal to documented fraud, I stopped showing up. The boundary I set was not the product of a single dramatic revelation. It was the result of years of paying attention, and finally choosing to believe what I had been shown instead of what I had hoped. You do not owe anyone access to your success on the basis of blood. Blood is a biological fact, not a moral entitlement. The people who contributed to who you are, who showed up when it cost them something, who believed in you before you had anything to show for it, those people deserve your gratitude and your loyalty. The people who used your name to open credit lines and called it family deserve nothing from you except the boundary you put between yourself and the next thing they might do. The spring in Austin is extraordinary. I run on the trail most mornings now, early, before the heat sets in, and there is a stretch by the water where the light comes through the trees in a way that makes everything look newly made. I am 31 years old and I run that stretch thinking about the person I was at 17, learning to drive alone in an empty parking lot, understanding for the first time that no one was going to give me what I needed and deciding, quietly and without drama, to go get it myself. That 17-year-old did not know exactly what she was building. She just kept building. Whatever version of that 17-year-old is inside you, trust her. She knows more about survival than anyone who has ever made you feel like the afterthought in their story. Have you ever had a family member try to use your name, your success, or your hard work for their own benefit and had to make the decision to walk away? I want to hear your story in the comments. And if something in what I shared today felt familiar, please share this video with someone who might need it, subscribe to Mending Stories for more, and know that you are not alone in what you have been through. Until next time, remember that the life you build from scratch is the one no one can ever take credit for.